Welcome everyone to Pom in Oz show with, by popular demand, this man gets asked for every fucking video. Big Fazz, how you doing?
I'm good. I think there's a bit of maybe a bit of mayonnaise on that. I'm not too sure how popular I am sometimes, but it's great. It's great. It's been a long time between drinks for us on these, and to be honest, it's just nice to be doing one that's at 8 o'clock rather than a soccer game kicking off at 11:30 and a boring 0-0 between a Newcastle and Arsenal. So it's actually good to be at a nice time.
Well, at least we know we're going to kick some goals because we're on it. So obviously we've got a nice little agenda. There's going to be a moment as well for questions in the comments. Here's your number one fan as well, Ben. Big Ben. He loves a bit of Fazz, the Fazz Lenker. And the amazing Zach Bob. Good day to you. So the first thing we're going to talk about as a duo, but also as a group. It's a family discussion. And Melbourne, the team to beat this year, and if so, who can beat them? So you guys and girls in the audience, if you think, are they a lock to win it? Or can someone beat them? What do you think, Fazz?
Look, I think you've given me a nice little half volley outside off stump to start with. It's pretty simple, this one. Yeah, clearly they're so balanced. Best midfield, best ruckman. If you want to talk about one weakness for them, it may be their key forwards if Tom Mcdonald doesn't quite get up. But to me, don't get sucked in by the 3 weeks prior to the to the Brisbane game with their losses. They're the team to beat. I mean, they absolutely torched Brisbane.
That they're a very dangerous side, aren't they? But I mean, are they unbeatable though? And which sides are you looking at that potentially could usurp them? Because we know when they're probably at the best, they're probably very tough to beat. But I don't know. I reckon we're the favourites to beat them.
Look, they're not unbeatable. No way. I mean, this is a great season. If any of my workmates are listening, they'll know exactly that I've been spruiking Carlton are pretty much the best matchup for Melbourne. And I was saying that before the season even started, or maybe about the preseason when it was quite obvious that the game plan we were playing, and obviously copped a few choice looks in the staff room and all that. But I've always been big on. I think Carlton they do match up well. That midfield, our defence, but the one weapon that not many teams have is the two key forwards in Harry and Charlie. Not many teams, even Melbourne, don't have that to their disposal. So definitely they are beatable. And that's just us. I still think Fremantle. I think Fremantle are a good team if they can get it on the right day. And believe it or not, I think Geelong, there's something about Geelong this year. There's just something. They're a bit different to the previous years. They're not so much relying too heavily on their older players other than Hawkins. They've got a good balance. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you very much as well for our first donation from Zach. Just $1. Cheers, my friend. You're an absolute legend, real young superstar. Is Zach. I agree with you on the Geelong call, and I know we've got Luke and Andrew in the chat, big Cat fans themselves. I do think they're going to be one of the teams to beat them. I also think as well, this is a dark horse, but I do like, and I hate to say it, but I do think when you're in the finals, I do think that the Dogs, Collingwood, and ourselves play probably the best brand of football for finals. As you know, once you're in the finals, this is a big thing with Geelong, that their game is great for a long season. I don't think they have the tempo in a final where teams just put it all away and say, right, I'm coming out swinging. And you see that a lot in the finals. Teams fly out of the blocks. And I think Carlton's is probably the most fastest Hail Mary type style of football. But I do think that Pies could surprise teams. As a Carlton fan, say if we finish fourth, the only team there that I probably wouldn't want to play that is currently in the bottom half of that draw is probably Pies, because I think that they are the team that will come out of the blocks.
Yeah, I think I've been very big on Collingwood. In my opinion, I think them and Richmond probably play that game plan is really hard to stop. I'm not too sure Richmond have the cattle to go. They've got the experience, but to go there. The Dogs. Now, I again, my workmates probably remember back that I made a big call at the start of the year that the Dogs would miss the finals. And I got called some very choice words for a school, mind you. I said the Dogs won't make the finals. I'm still backing that. I still don't think they'll make finals. But I do agree with you. If they did get there, they would be dangerous. The team that look to me, the teams I don't want to play. I don't want to play Richmond. I don't want to play Collingwood. They're the two teams that worry me. Everyone else, don't worry me. Don't worry me at all. To be honest, I think they're all right. Geelong, again, I agree with you. I just think there's just something about them this year. There's something a little bit different. All right, something a little bit different.
It's probably now on never for them, isn't it? Really, I mean, we can't keep recycling old players. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I'd agree on that.
I've said it at the start of the year. People laughed that Carlton were going to be a chance for the flag. I also said I remember saying Charlie Curnow will win the Coleman with 75 plus, and a famous Collingwood fan actually told me that Peter Wright will kick more goals than him. Looking fucking mighty stupid he is now. But I genuinely believe, call me high, it might be the pain medication I'm on because I've got the Spanish flu, but Carlton are winning this flag this year.
Oh, yeah, I'm up and about. I said that, why not? Why not? Now, there's one thing, actually, this comment just come up. There's one team that we haven't mentioned at all, and I'm glad we haven't mentioned them, and that's Brisbane. Now, I really hope my mate Richie is listening to this because he will back me here. I have said many times that Brisbane are the most vanilla, nothing side to grace this competition. They couldn't even win a flag when it was gifted to them, like literally gifted to them. They couldn't even win it then. To me, Brisbane, they don't even come into conversation because what's their point of difference? They got none. They got no point of difference, which is I'm going to look like a fool when we get to our best player or underrated player because it's a Brisbane player. But they just got no point of difference. They're so vanilla. So I'm so glad that didn't come up until someone mentioned it because to me, good night, Brisbane.
Mate, I'm with you. I think for me, Collingwood, Brisbane and Geelong, for me, I think are the same. If they play their brand on a given day, you're fucked, right? Why I think Carlton are going to win, though, is all of our losses have come losing key personnel in games. And I think only Melbourne and us can say that they've missed something very major. And what I mean by that is an on-baller, a key defender, and a ruckman in game. You ain't really replacing them because if you've got them as a sub, you're an idiot. It's like anyone who plays FIFA 22 online with a goalkeeper on the subs bench. You're a moron. Everyone has 5 attackers. So for me, I think we're the two teams that have proven it. And I think Carlton, for me, if I was a Collingwood, a Melbourne, a Geelong, a Brisbane, the only top 8 I wouldn't want to play is Carlton because you haven't actually seen our best 22 yet. And I'll tell you what, if we're dicking teams with 15 players that are best 22, 3 key components out, I'd be worried. And I wouldn't discount Blair's team as well. I know Fremantle were woeful against us, were made to look woeful. I do think, though, in a finals, there's just something about them in the finals as well. I think they play having a strong defence wins your flags.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. The best defence in the comp, Fremantle. And
unless it's Charlie.
Yeah, unless it's Charlie. But best defence in the comp, Fremantle. So I think that can take them pretty far. It just goes to show the mauling that Carlton gave them on Saturday, because against any other team with a relatively weaker defence, that's every bit of a 10-goal loss. So I thought Fremantle actually held up really, really strong, really strong. So yeah.
Mate, spot on, and some great comments coming in. I agree with you to an extent. I think we need Gov from the intercept and rebound perspective. Can't be underestimated. Other issues, which of our small forwards, Fish, Durden, Owens, Motlop. Well, we're going to get on to some of them small forwards because amazingly, one of them, a Carlton player, is in my most underrated player in the comp, and you'll love that. But I agree, and I do think Kemp could be the guy that usurps McGovern. I do think based on this, but some great comments there. We've got Richmond, one of them dark horses. They had a lot of injuries. I agree with Harley here. Do you know what I mean? I agree with him. In 2019, they were very similar. I do think you can't count Richmond out purely from that aesthetic, really, to that experience that you mentioned at the top of the show. It's a big thing, I think. A big thing.
Huge.
Well, then we've got, and I think the chat will like this, AFL media bans. There's been a lot of banter in the press, and I don't just mean the media bans about Carlton. I mean, the fact Kane Corn said after 5 good games, which are very good games by TDK, I'm not getting away from that, and I rate him, but saying he's $1 million footballer shows me that maybe Kane Corns has spent way too much time doing toxic smoke training. You know what I mean? But there's a lot of banter here. And what I want to talk about is little things like I saw them defend Nat 5 today for touching the umpire and saying, oh, that's really harsh if he's suspended. But you do know if that was Toby Green, they'd be saying, can we bring back the crucifixion for what it is? But it's also the mismatch. So I love Ben's take on this. They always talk about Collingwood being the youngest side, but over the last 5 rounds, Carlton have had players with less games and a younger side. Carlton being one of the youngest sides in the last 4 rounds. The media don't mention it. You saw at the start of the year, Carlton are on the ball, best side in the comp, don't transition the ball. But I saw an article this week by David King who said that in round 4, Sydney need to be taken serious because they dominate around the contest. It does seem every week the media changes their agenda to suit their secret agenda. So I want to ask the audience and you, does the AFL media have an agenda versus Carlton Football Club and other teams?
Oh, mate, again, another nice, juicy half volley outside off stump. The media are a piss take. They are an absolute piss take. And if they even spent 30 seconds Googling something, they'd actually get some facts right. 100% they've got an agenda. 100% they've got an agenda against the likes of us, Collingwood and all that. The biggest myth in AFL football is that Collingwood are a young side. Now, I rated them, like we said, we spoke about them being a flag chance. It is the biggest myth that they're in a rebuild and they're a young side. Their rebuild hasn't even started yet. They are, I just cannot get sucked into this, or can't believe people are getting sucked into this media love fest. Very similar to what they were doing about Essendon last year. Very similar. It's like, come on, you know? And then surprised when Essendon got beat by 60 points in a final. Dude, they fell into the finals. They 11-11. You win 11 games this year, you're finishing 15th. Like, do you know what I mean? So the media are a piss take. They absolutely have an agenda. Perfect example, what you're talking about, the Kane Corn scenario. The only thing that he could achieve by saying that Tom De Koning is a $1 million player is to just try and cause trouble. Just to try and cause a little bit of, negativity around Carlton. All the conversations today is how can Carlton fit players under the salary cap? All the questions to Brian Cook on the radio today is, how are you going to manage to fit these players in? Well, here's the answer. We fit the players in by letting Tom De Koning go. It's not that difficult if he wants $1 million. But the fact is, there is no purpose for the reason Kane Corn said what he said, other than to just cause trouble. It's a piss take, and I'm so sick of the media. That's why we do these things. That's why the fan cams or the fan stuff from Terry, from all those people out there, that's why we do this stuff, because the media are a piss take.
Mate, it is. And I listen to, for those who don't, if they don't see it, Luke Sayers was actually on a podcast and discussed the salary cap squeeze. And I did think it was funny because Kane Cons has used that today as evidence he was right, because he did use the phrase, obviously, when you start getting better and players develop, there is always a salary cap squeeze. That was his exact words. Now, there will be a salary cap squeeze if you start giving twats $1 million a year because they played 5 good games. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But I do think the big one, and this is what I always want to talk about, is if you listen to the great the great Luke Hodge, as Cameron, $8 donation. Yes, the latest is we have let players go next year because we can't afford the salary cap with TDK. It's rubbish. Spot on. Is if you look at Luke Hodge, he did say that his biggest contract was at Brisbane, and players genuinely asked for less money to stay in a successful franchise. Now, what I thought was interesting about Kane Cornes is he actually released the article at the start of the year saying his sources told him Carlton had actually got less than what Cripps was reported on. And Cripps had taken a salary cap decrease with Walsh. But now he's saying that Walsh and Cripps are on 800K in his article. I think you'll find a lot of these players, particularly someone like Charlie Curnow, who has been paid an exorbitant amount of money. And we know I love Charlie, but he's been injured for 3 years. I imagine he will drop it. And also what Kane Cornes forgets is Carlton are the masters of front-loading and back-loading their deals. So 100% facts. All these players will re-sign. Carlton will be fine.
Yeah, and look, I think at the end of the day, you just have to look. Other than the Treloar situation at Collingwood, which I can guarantee you was more cultural than financial, teams don't lose big-name players money-wise. They just don't. It's the players down the bottom end who drop out. And you can argue whether Tom De Koning is at the bottom end or whatever. But then Carlton aren't going to lose these players. You just don't. It just won't happen. It never happens. It just doesn't happen. As far as the contracts go, what really blows my mind is the lack of understanding about how contracts work. It's not just here's a piece of paper, you're on 500 a year. That's not how it works. It's you've got your base salary plus match day appearances plus milestones plus this. So those numbers that were reported on Footy Classified or whatever it was on, that is if those guys all made All-Australian, played 22 games, that is their max earn. So you look at someone like Mitch McGovern, who everyone says we're overpaying, which we probably are. There is no way he's walking away with $750,000 a year. He's not, because he's played 5 games in 2 years. So people's knowledge and understanding of how contracts actually work is quite distressing. As far as that goes, it's not like your average job. It's not like, my job, I know what my salary is. So yeah, it's like I'll get, these players have to play an X amount of games, and it works both ways. So you look at someone like Cottrell, for example, and Hewitt is another example. They'd be getting nice little pay packets come the end of the season because they're probably doing more than what their original contract expected of them. But yeah, this is the biggest non-issue. I think I posted on Twitter the other day, the most over-talked about thing in football is salary cap. It is just the most over-talked, overhyped garbage that never has an impact, ever. Other than Collingwood, which, like I said, I believe was more cultural than financial.
Mate, I'm with you, and thank you very much for the $8 donation from Cameron. Last week, Cons did say we had no backs left and should play Curnow in the backs. Spot on. The guy is a melt of the highest on. If you ever wonder what a melt is, Ken Cons is it. I mean, the thing I want to add to this as well is their example, and I agree with Ant here, with Cook and Sayers at the wheel, I'm not concerned, particularly with what Cook has done with Geelong. Geelong have got a lot of senior players for years, never lost anyone. I do think the biggest thing no one's talking about as well, and the way I'd alleviate everyone's fears of this, is their example was North are rebuilding, Essendon are rebuilding, a lot of money left in the salary cap. Someone like Harry will attract them. Remember when we were shit in 2018 and we had loads of salary cap? Loads of salary cap. We ended up paying overs for B graders. So what is more likely to happen is they maybe take a Setterfield, who is maybe the next camp off the rank, maybe a Bam Bam even, a guy that isn't the superstar of the team, but they'll probably pay him 800k overs. Do you know what I mean? Like Mitch McGovern in that Adelaide forward line, he was the third best forward there, but Carlton threw big money at him and got him over. Genuinely, like you say, it's not like the EPL. Harry Mackay would only leave probably for a top 4 side if he did. And I don't think he will. And them sides genuinely don't worry about their salary cap because their salary cap is already at max capacity.
Yeah, and I think as well, just people, if anyone's stressed about it or worried, which I know people do because my inboxes and messages get filled up with people stressing out about it. And one of the biggest things that comes up all the time is, Harry might go to North Melbourne to play with his brother, or Tom De Koning might go to Geelong to play with his brother. I'm like, hang on a minute, they're a brother as well. Why wouldn't Ben Mackay want to come to Carlton to play with his brother? Or why wouldn't Sam want? It's an irrational stress that I think people just, if you're going to stress about something, don't let it be that. Just don't stay up at night worrying about who's going to sign what and what are we going to have a team. That is the least of our worries.
Mate, spot on. And I agree with Charlotte here. Whatever the media says, salary is just bullshit. They don't really know the truth regarding it. And I think my last point on this, and I would love to know what the audience think. I would love an NBA style where these are actually public forum. And the reason I ask this is when you hear about Carlton, I've already seen the other clubs do it. Carlton ripped off the AFL in the salaries in the noughties. They're probably doing it again. No one ever talks about GWS, though. They've managed to always have that salary cap, and they've lost one superstar in a decade.
Yeah.
And you ask yourself, how do they have all their stars? No one asks the question. People will start asking the question about us soon.
100%.
I'd love it to be public forum. Do you know what I mean? Public forum. So it ends the conjecture. Ends the conjecture.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
And I think that way it would stop it.
It'd just be a big shock for everyone when they think there's blokes running around on 500,000 a year, but they're actually really only on about 250, 300. So, yeah.
Mate, if you speak to some of the players as well, and you get a good relationship with them, some of them actually admit on what they're on as well to you. And, and I've had a couple of players who aren't there now, but have actually laughed at the amount is reported and been very open and said, I wish it was fucking that. So it's quite an amusing thing. Like wherever they get their estimates from, mate, don't get them to do a quote on your fence.
And I think just the last one I'll add on this, because I spent a lot of time on what I think is rubbish, but the last one I'll add is the other thing people don't take into account is the salary cap increases every year, or they're just about to sign off on this $1 billion TV rights deal. The salary cap is going to go up, and a lot of people will say, "Oh yeah, but the percentage increase." If a player's already signed a contract, it doesn't change. Like, we could wake up tomorrow and the salary cap go up by $1 million, whatever, right? It won't, but that's what could happen, and then all of a sudden, every team's got money to play with. Like it's just. Yeah, just don't stress about it, guys. It's all good.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. And we'll come on to something happy because the Carlton fans will love this.
Yes.
Coach of the year. Who are we saying is the coach of the year? I did read an article today and they were saying it's between Longmuir and McFly and actually left out Voss, which made me laugh. But I would say Longmuir, McFly, and I would certainly say Voss is probably the Usain Bolt of this.
I think the thing that makes me laugh the most about this year, and I saw someone tweet this, I think it was the Teague strain or whatever, someone quite funny tweeted this and saying, we went from having a dud list to we can't keep all our superstars in the space of 6 months. According to the media narrative, we went from having end of last year, we had a dud list, and now in the space of 6 months, how are we going to keep all our superstars? To me, how people have forgotten how diabolical we were Like it shocks me how media, whoever it is, whoever comes up with these who's the coach of the year, forgotten how ridiculously pathetic our football club was. Like pathetic. To now being in a conversation of coming into round 16, we're a top 4 chance. No team has had that big of a jump. Yes, the Collingwood people will jump on and say, hey, we came from 17th and flies got us into the top 8, whatever. But they had I still think he's a good shout, Craig McRae, because he's definitely changed them as well. But no team has had the complete cultural shift like we have. It's insane, and it has to be Voss. And if it's not Voss, then you'd be looking at recruit of the year being Brian Cook or Sayers, because those three, Voss, Cook, Sayers, I just how people have forgotten how terrible we were shocks me.
Mate, it blags my head. And thank you very much, Brian Ambrose McMahon, for his $15 donation. You're an absolute legend. A lot of Voss is coming in here, and I agree. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Voss. Mitch here. I reckon Rutten definitely would be in my coach of the year for Bants. Yeah. He's made my week look very happy.
Big shout out to Mitch.
Do you know what I mean? Shout out to Mitch. I know he's a big friend of yours.
Yeah,
I agree with Charlotte here. Voss, Sayers, and Cook, definitely the Charlie's Angels. For me, I just don't think you can look past Voss, because if we talk about stats, something that I love, he took over a side that was bottom 5 in nearly 90% of all the team stats Champion Starter articulate. Carlton are inside the top 8 of nearly every one. Biggest one being transition and scores around stoppages, scores around centre clearances. Lee Matthews this time last year called Carlton fraudulent as a football team because they had the best on ballers statistically on their own, but they were so dire around scores from stoppage. And he said it was fraudulent. Voss has done something that I don't think many people thought possible or even probable.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I knew there'd be a change there, but I thought it'd be gradual. I thought this year would be like that transition year, which actually excites me because I still think it is a transition year. What he's done, and I think the perfect question to ask is, last year, at the back end of last year, you're probably scratching your head thinking which players have improved. You're saying, oh, Walsh had a better year, Mackay had a better year. This year, flip the question on its head. You're struggling to find a player who's gone backwards this year. And I think that's a testament to Voss.
Mate, I'm with you. And I think me and Legdog was on the phone the other day and we're having a bit of banter. We only counted 5 players on the list who haven't statistically are on course for their best year. And the 5 that weren't, who have played, have either got too little game time to really correlate in fairness, or have stayed the same. So for me, it's not even a question. And I agree with John Holden here. To give Pies a bit of love, and I hate to do it, I think their improvement has been amazing. But what I will say about Pies is a lot of that list is there that made the grand final only a few years ago. You've got to remember, when they made the grand final, Carlton were coming off, a 2-win year.
Yeah.
And so you've got to say, yes, what McFly's done is amazing. What Fly has done is amazing at Collingwood, but half of his list has been there and done it. Half of our list was staring down the face of working at Coles.
Yeah, it was. And I think that's perfect. Exactly what you said. If you talk about when coaches take over clubs, you go back to the Brendan Bolton era, and we had no senior players. I mean, we had Mark Murphy and Cade Simpson running around pretty much. Ed Kerno, right? McRae's walked into this Collingwood job. You've got grand final players on every line. You've got Pendlebury's a premiership player. Sybon is a premiership player. Grundy's played in a grand final. More, and to be honest, they were one Dom Sheed miracle away from actually being premiership players. So, yeah, I think there's a bit of a false economy when it comes to Craig McRae. I think he's a wonderful person. He's a wonderful coach. He's doing a great job. But there is a bit of that false economy because of what they've actually got on their list, which is why earlier on the show, we still consider them to be a flag contender because of their list.
Mate, spot on. And I agree with the guys in the chat, Jai and Jacana and Fab. Sauce as well. All of Saucy's boys have literally just taken the piss this year. And I do hope, I know Luke Sayers occasionally watches my content because he does miss me. He does message me. I hope Luke Sayers finds a way when we win the flag this year to bring Sauce in it. Because
Sauce can present the cup.
Will be a fucking huge part of this. And I agree with Azza, but he is a pie now, so fuck him. He can get fucked Bolton. But I hope Sauce is there in some capacity. Because
and I think
a big thanks needs to be had.
100%. And I think they posted something on there about the 2015 draft. You got Whittaker, Mackay, Curnow, and Jack Silvani later on in that draft. But Whittaker, Mackay, Curnow, I mean, I remember having a conversation a few years ago with my old man, and I remember saying that every dynasty team or every premiership winning team can always go back to one draft and say that was the one. Everyone talks about the Buddy, Roughhead, who was it? Lewis draft, right? 2015 was that draft for us. It's there's no clearer evidence that Sauce absolutely. And you look at those players who went. Teams would be, and again, I don't want to bury Essendon too bad because I've got really good mates to go from. But mate, picking Parrish and Francis when Mackay and Curnow were still on the board, mate, everyone would slag off Richmond for taking Tambling over Buddy. But man, oh man, that is you had 2 picks in a row and you still left Mackay and Curnow on the board. That is just unforgivable.
You look at that 2015 draft and Cunners was in there as well. And he's a guy that I look at the way Carlton are playing now and thinking, Pom's big call. He'd probably be all Australian playing in this side because I do think he's got something mercurial about him. But I actually went back on that 2015 draft. There's a lot of banana skins around Carlton's pick. And it's interesting. 5 out of the 7 pundits who did a fantasy draft said the most obvious one for Carlton was to take Josh Shackey, pick 1. Now, in another world, and it's interesting because I remember this draft well, Shackey statistically was better than Curnow and TDK. I mean, Curnow and Mackay. He killed it. There was a few reservations on him, but tell you what a draft. If you go through that, there was a lot of obvious selections. But Sauce, you could tell, had done what he always done, earmarked who he wanted and took them. And to be fair, fucking nailed it.
Well, the fact that Charlie Curnow, I remember following that draft quite closely. And I remember Charlie Curnow was touted as the number 1 pick for a long time there. And then obviously fell away a bit of injuries. And I think he got in a bit of trouble off the field. So he fell away a bit there. But even Wiedemann, I mean, Melbourne taking Wiedemann, the pick before I think we took Mackay. Like just little things like that. But yeah, look, obviously sometimes you can say, look, drafts can be a lottery and whatever. But like it's Mitch, you're not going to make very many friends with that comment, but you're right. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mitch, he's going to love this bit.
Yeah.
So best player of the year, right? I'm going to start. This is for Mitch.
For me, Peter.
For me, there's only one player in the comp, right, who's the best. And this guy, for me, isn't just the best player this year, is the best player in football. In football. And that's none other than number 30, Charlie Curnow. For me, watching him, there is no footballer that competes with him. I read an article last week saying Jeremy Cameron was the best footballer in the competition. For me, Charlie Curnow's got him covered. Find me a player that can crumb. Find me a player that can mark. Find me a player that's that big, that tall, that quick, that sexy. He is 6'6" of beach steel, I tell you. And for me, Charlie Curno's not just the best player this year, and if the Brownlow was given out for talent, he'd win it. Best player in the league.
It's hard to argue. It's hard to argue. I think the most disappointing thing, I think, when the dust settles and we've won our 4 flags and everything's hunky-dory, I think the disappointing thing is we'll look back on Charlie Curnow and think he could have been a Buddy Franklin type career. Like, he won't kick 1,000 goals simply because he missed so much football, but there is not one player in the competition who does what he does. Not one. He's not a lot of a myth about him. He's not even that big either. Like, his height wise, he's only about the 192, 193. But you still need to put a big boy on him because he's one of the best marks going around. He's got pace. He's got X factor. He crumbs. Like, there's not one player in the competition who can do what he does. It's as simple as that. And yeah, I agree with you. As far as his just footy nous as well, he's just a smart footballer.
He's got everything. He's got everything. And for me, another big call. The best final series I've ever seen in my life was Dustin Martin 2017.
Yes.
I guarantee this guy here will average close to 20 touches and 3 goals a game in that final series. Charlie Curnow will look at Dustin Martin and just laugh when he's in the final because that guy is built for finals. I know Mitch here telling me Jordan Ridley gave him a bath a few weeks ago. Jesus, mate. Peter Wright, tell you what, you need to... He must be out on the sauce with Bailey Smith.
A bit of Mitch.
In the chat, let me know your best player this year, and Fazz, hit me.
Yeah, look, I mean, you've obviously thrown the big one out in Charlie. I think, Carlton or across the competition, I think it's hard to look past the likes of a Jeremy Cameron. I think he's had a phenomenal year. I'm a big believer as I kind of avoid talking about midfielders, to be honest. I think, other than if they're exceptional, like a Sam Walsh, it's very hard to say best player. But yeah, you're looking at Curnow, you're looking at Cameron, Gawn. But if it's just purely Carlton based, Charlie Curnow or Walsh, I think, best player for sure, comfortably too. Actually, that's a great call. Actually, Sam Doherty, it's a wonderful call. On the way to the open training today, I was speaking to my dad, and we were just talking about if you were playing Carlton, who are the players you want to stop? And obviously, you can't stop everyone. And I said the two I'd be determined to stop would be Cripps, just because if you stop Cripps, you kind of stop the outlet, you stop everyone. And Sam Doherty is the other one. You talk about, and we'll get to this soon, but you talk about players who do not get enough praise, and basically the only praise he gets is because of his knee injuries and because of his cancer battles and all that, which is fine. But he's a phenomenally good footballer as well. So it's not just a bloke who's done 2 knees and survived cancer twice. He is an unbelievably good footballer.
His year as well is statistically tracking better than his All-Australian year, which is amazing that none of the people talk about. I do want to throw another name in. If it's not Charlie Curnow, a guy that I really, really, really enjoy watching as well outside of my own team is Brayshaw at Fremantle. He was battered by the boys this year.
I had him written down.
But he is one of the guys that just outside of it is very good. Raffin Tune here, I actually think Cripper for me as well would be in the conversation, and he's mentioned last week's game, and I actually thought Cripper's game last week was the best game I've ever seen Cripper play, and this might surprise people. His touches were under where you'd usually expect, but I think the most influential player in a team was Cochin in 2017, a guy that redeveloped his game from 30 touches a week to getting the ball out of tough situations and giving it to players that can play. If Cripper can have 23 touches every week, that amount of clearances, that amount of stoppage clearances, and that amount of tackles and pressure acts, nearly 30 pressure acts, which is insane, and give the ball to Walsh, Cerra. Carlton win far more games than if he has a game like he had against Brisbane in 2019, where he literally took all the midfield ball. If he's giving it to these players, he's unstoppable doing that. And I thought Cripper's game was absolutely electric last week.
Yeah, and it just goes back to your point about what you said with Lee Matthews last year, saying that about our midfield. Spot on, absolutely spot on. Cripps, he can have this 38 and kick 4 or whatever it is, but individually they do great things. But collectively, you need them on the same page. That unison, that teamwork. I'd rather have 5 midfielders getting 25 touches than one midfielder getting 40, if that makes sense. So. But as Chris just said before, yeah, Gawn most influential. I agree. Walsh, and I think maybe Lever most consistent, and Whittaker most reliable. That's a great call.
No, I agree, and I agree with this as well. I know Doc's got a lot of love from Gavin Co. Harry nailed it. I do think Doc is our Luke Hodge. Spot on.
Yeah, 100%. Great call.
Spot on. So. We're on that, and this is the underrated star. So, can be Carlton, can be anyone. I'll give you 2 to start off, right?
All right.
My underrated star from another club, right?
Yep.
Who I really like, and it pains me to say it because I call Jason Horne-Francis a fraud. But this, for me, is the best young player in the comp, Nick Dacos. I don't think Nick Dacos gets enough love. I know there was a ridiculous article about him being Walsh, but I would say, for me, grossly underrated in this rising star this year. Hasn't been bigged up. What he is doing is nothing short of phenomenal.
It's a great call.
He's a great footballer. And the other one, this is going to surprise some Carlton fans. Matty Owens has led the inside 50 count for tackles since round 1, right? And he's still leading it even though he missed last week. For me, Matty Owens, when forward pressure is the biggest leader of who wins flags in the AFL, from a side that last year only had 1 player averaging 1 inside 50, to average just 2, short of 2 inside 50 tackles per game, the most turnovers forced inside 50 in the AFL, for me, is the most underrated player in the competition. The fact that media don't even know who the guy is beyond me. He is an absolute superstar.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You've gone a little different to what I went as far as, I agree with you. People, even supporters, you say Matt Owens, opposition supporters, who's that? So yeah, definitely underrated. I've gone a little bit more the other way. So I've got a few listed here. So I think, Doc, I think even Jacob Whittaker is criminally underrated, disgustingly
Definitely
underrated.
By the media, because Darcy Moore gets in the media all the time because he looks like Keira Knightley.
Yeah, it is disgusting how underrated Jacob Whittaker is. Even the likes, I think Tom Hawkins is still underrated. I think he's one of the best forwards I've ever seen in my life. He's still criminally underrated. People criticize him because he pushes in the back or whatever. Mate, he's a beast. I love him. The 2 though that stand out for me is this is going to surprise a lot of people, is Mitch Lewis from Hawthorn. I think he's quite underrated. I know that's going to surprise a lot of people, me saying that, but I think in a team that's not sort of going too well midfield wise and all that, for him to still kick the goals and get the opportunities as he does, I think he's quite a handy little player. But the big one, this for me, the first name that came to my head when you sent me these questions was McCluggage. I think McCluggage is definitely one of the best wingers / midfielders going around, and maybe it's because it's in Brisbane and we don't hear much about him, but I think he is definitely, if he was down here, he'd be getting talked up like the Brayshaws, like all that. Yeah, I think
for me, Cluggage is a great one, purely because when you look at their midfield, you always think Jared Lyons, you think Lockie Neal. He does go under the radar, doesn't he? But invariably, you watch him, he does tear it up. Another guy I'd like to throw into the mix, and Mitch, you'll love this as a Bombers fan. Adam Sard as well. And legit, I think Adam Sard, for me, doesn't get any kudos. And it's bizarre because the AFL media literally touches its proverbial downstairs for anyone that gets meters gained, anyone that breaks lines. And for me, I don't think there's a better line breaker in the AFL than Adam Sard.
Yeah, but he doesn't defend, mate. So is what I've been told.
Crazy. He's 85% one-on-one win ratio suggests he does. But as Charlotte says, big woof. If you are down there this week, the Jumper Punch boys have started a campaign. Get them. And this one here should be a great load of fun, right? Because we know if you follow Fazz on Twitter, pretty much every opinion this gentleman has had is unpopular. So give me your unpopular football opinion.
Okay, I've got two.
Go on.
The first one is that, and people, this might actually end your channel, so I apologise in a heartbeat. Paddy Dow just simply doesn't have a spot in our team. He just simply doesn't. And people can say, oh yeah, but when players injured, but no, he just simply doesn't have a spot. You've said it many times on your reviews of games. He just does not. The style he plays just does not fit in with our collective midfield group. We spoke about Cripps can have 38 and kick 4, and individual performances. Yeah, Dow's numbers individually fantastic, but as a unit, as a collective, the way he plays does not complement our other midfielders, and he simply just doesn't have a spot. And that's I'm sorry that upsets people, but that's the reality. In the VFL, when he's kind of like the one banana or whatever, great. His stats look fantastic. That's fine. Comes in, he just simply doesn't have a spot. And my other unpopular opinion is that shout out to Kane Corns. When Mark Pittonet comes back, I'd rather have him playing than Tom De Koning. And whether that means and I don't think you can have a forward line of Harry, Charlie, and Tom De Koning and Jack. So you can read how you'd like. I'm not saying I'd want him dropped, but I'm just saying if you had to choose between Pittonet and De Koning, I'm taking Pittonet every day of the week. On grand final day, Pittonet's going to win you the game. Tom De Koning won't.
Mate, spot on. I think, mate, I think you've nailed it with Dow. And I think if you actually go back and watch the game he played, you actually see a lot of what went wrong in Richmond. The fact that the midfielders got way too far away from their support. And that is Dow's natural game. And watching a lot of VFL, for me, Dow's brilliant, right? Brilliant in VFL. And he's improved massively. I'm going to give Dow some shout outs. He's improved massively. His defensive craft is better. But his game style is the antichrist of what Voss instills in the midfield. And I just don't think you can play him. And I think the fact he prefers Kennedy, which is probably the weakest link in our midfield, says it all. Says it all.
And I think you explain it best in some of your videos, but even just to kind of simplify it a bit, Carlton's midfield are really they play it like this. They play it together. They in it together, handball out. Paddy Dow likes to run away from the contest, which you become one short. We move together in the contest, out of it and forward. And I think that's as simple as you can say. The way he plays just doesn't complement. And yeah, I'm sure he's a lovely guy, lovely kid, got skills, but he's just not a spot in the team. What about the Pittonet one?
The Pittonet one, I kind of agree with the chat. I would prefer Pittonet. Even now, I agree with that part of it. That I think Pittonet, for me, if I had to choose one, I'd choose Pittonet all day long. And I think everything backs it up. The stats, he was the number one ruckman in the comp over 5 rounds for hit-outs won and hit-outs to advantage. You can't argue with that, particularly with the way Carlton play. However, I will say, I actually think TDK and Pittonet together, as demonstrated in round 2 versus the Dogs, and a lot of the games I've watched this year without Pittonet, I think if we can throw TDK 40% of the time when the ruckman tires, the way he killed English in that round 2 fixture, I think Carlton's midfield is unstoppable with that, because I think the fact Pittonet is a thug type ruckman, where TDK is agile and he's like Bambi jumping over people, I think it ruins ruckman's rhythm. And I think that is deadly. And I also think that Rowan Marshall gets a lot of kudos being the ruckman that goes forward and kicks goals. I think TDK is already better than Rowan Marshall.
Yeah. So I think that, and I agree with you. In the perfect world, I'd love Pittonet and TDK, and that round 2 game was a perfect example of it. But how does it look in the forward line? How does it look with Harry, Charlie, TDK, Jack? Because I saw some comment unless you've got a high bench rotation, I don't know. I hope it works, and I think it really does. And I actually agree with your point saying, when it comes to late in quarters or whatever, how great is having TDK running around. I'm just our forward line looked at its best. I think on the weekend it was so open. There was so much space. I just worry you could fall into the trap of clogging it up just a little.
I think they'll play 2 ruckmen, and I think what will drop out is someone like Plowman will drop out. And in an ideal world, Mitch McGovern, or who I think will win that job, Brodie Kemp. And then they've got that rotation forward and back. And I think the fact you've seen TDK work so hard behind the ground, I think that rotation will come in there. And I think TDK will start being a Max Gawn off the ball and being the leg work for Pittonet. And I think that's moving forward. That's how it's just a prediction, but that's probably how I'd fit them in. I think when Zach Williams is all fit and firing, that gives them another rotation that Voss likes to do. He's been playing Noons quite a lot. So I think Noons will eventually come out for Zach Williams, and Zach Williams will become the new Noons. And I think they'll switch them with Doc and Williams playing a bit higher up the ground. I think that's how it'll work in an ideal world. My unpopular AFL opinion, throw yours in the chat as well. My unpopular opinion, this is AFL based. Jack Silvani is in the top 5 half forward flankers in the AFL.
What's unpopular about that?
I think it's an unpopular opinion in the AFL.
Well, he's certainly a player who we could have mentioned in underrated players for sure. And you're right. I think, again, opposition supporters, you say Jack Silvani, what do they say? Oh, he's not as good as his dad. Yeah, okay, no worries. I agree. I like it. That is quite unpopular. It's not quite as good as the Steven Gerrard as the most overrated player of all time, but it's not bad.
And my other underrated, because you have 2, and you're like this. I think, and this is going to upset my good mates Andrew and Luke, that Geelong Football Club in the last 10 years are the worst football team in the AFL for management. I think their list strategy is the worst in the AFL. And I think the fact that they've sold their future for the now. So that being said, I think Chris Scott is the worst AFL coach potentially of all time. I would put him worse than Teague, because I think Teague could have won top of the ladder so many times with that list.
That is a controversial call. Look, it becomes that question you ask. I actually get quite jealous of Geelong fans because their team's good every year, but you just know they're never a threat to actually win it. So I think everyone's team, unless you're a Hawthorn supporter, I think everyone's second team is Geelong. Why? Because they're nice to watch. They're always up and about, but they're never going to win it. And even when they do win it, their fans are a little bit, keep to themselves anyway. So yeah, I do agree. If you there was a time as a Carlton supporter I'd begged to just be good. You don't even have to be. In fact, just be average. There was a time I'd be begging just to be average. So yeah, they've got a really good record. But tell you what, there'd be a few Geelong supporters, whether they admit it or not, who'd be laying in bed at night thinking how we just can't seem to win the flag. And good luck to you. But I like it. I do like it.
Mate, I am with you, and I think it's. I just think that I think that they would sacrifice just for one flag.
Yeah, 100%.
A lot of minor premiers, but does that matter? Do you know what I mean? I'd rather finish 4th and win it. And now we're on to round 16. Carlton, St Kilda, but also there's other games.
Is there?
People in the chat and you, what are your thoughts of the St Kilda game and round 16? What are your thoughts on just the round 16 in general? There's a lot of exciting ties, isn't there? A lot of finals questions will be answered. This one's a big one, isn't it? The round 16 game, because I genuinely think we're going to knock the first side out of finals. It becomes almost mathematically impossible for St Kilda. So now these games are getting down to that stage where dreams are going to be ruined.
Yeah, well, the Carlton St Kilda game specifically, I'm tipping us to win, obviously. A lot has to go right for St Kilda, or wrong for Carlton, however you want to put it, for them to win. Like a lot has to change. You know, whether it's we come out and play poorly, whether it's whatever it is, a lot has to change for them to win this game, for St Kilda to win this game of football. It's just nice to go into a game knowing if we play our game, play our best, we're going to win. You know, you think about last year where it's even our best might not have been good enough, where it's St Kilda need us to not play well, if that makes sense. You know, they're not going to beat us by purely playing their best footy. They need us to do something shitful. So I'm tipping us by 35. I think it'll be very similar to the Fremantle game. I don't think we'll have a burst in the game where we kick 8 goals in a quarter or whatever it is. I think it'll be a nice, steady accumulating of 4 goals in the first, 4 goals in the second, 5 in the third, and finish strongly with 5 or 6. So, yeah, that's what I think.
I like that. I think for me, I know there's a lot of comments in here with the danger game and got to keep our head switched on. For me, I think the biggest thing that you've seen with Carlton is they take it game by game, and Voss is very adamant on that. And chatting to the players, that's a big thing as well. Voss, there's no such thing as overconfidence at Carlton Football Club. Voss is like dragging them in and saying it's game by game, quarter by quarter.
It's your favourite line, isn't it? Danger game. That's your favourite.
It does my head in. Not nastily, it just does my head in because all 18 games are danger games, as we've proven this season. Any side can. I do think, though, from looking at it on the outside in, St Kilda are a mess. And I tell my wife this all the time. Aside that, at the start of the first 6 rounds, we're one of the most efficient sides inside 50. All their pressure numbers were showing top four side. The fact the last 6 weeks, this side now are ranked just above North Melbourne for efficiency inside 50, inside 50s, stoppages, their defensive transition. This side is in free-for-all. But unfortunately for Ratton, it does seem that this side now has stagnated because sides know how to beat this side now. They like to go out wide and cut back inside. Teams are literally now covering that. You watched last week and the week before, they're on a 3-game loss streak. People have found them out. And if I was St Kilda, I would be very worried about playing Carlton because their strength has been shown in this year is their ability to protect the wide areas and funnel you deep wide into nothingness is why Carlton at the moment are the number 2 side in defensive transition differential. They are controlling how you bring it inside our 50 now. So I personally think it's a 25-plus game, and I think Voss is very fortunate because these next 3 weeks we've had one where they were one of the worst defensive transition sides, one of our weaknesses. This side is shit at defensive transition. Next week you're playing a side that is hopeless at defensive transition. We're going to ingrain what Voss keeps talking about. Play your way. And the only way we stop playing our way is getting caught on the back, getting caught out the back. So they're going to learn it. As for other games, I think one of the most interesting games for Carlton fans is, and it is a big call, 7:25 on Saturday, Gold Coast versus Collingwood. Whoever loses that game won't play the 8.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a big call. I look forward to that game. I am looking forward to that game because I think Gold Coast, I just something about them. I think they might get the chocolates in that game. They're very good at home, Gold Coast. Collingwood do travel well, but I think other than the Carlton game, but that's the game I'm looking forward to most. You got the game tomorrow night, Brisbane and the Bulldogs. Virtually vanilla ice cream versus vanilla yogurt there. Whatever. Like the two most irrelevant football teams almost. So good luck to them both. I'll tune into Essendon Sydney. I love watching a bit of that. I think Essendon are a chance there. Sydney should get the job done, but I think Essendon just Lee Montagna kind of made himself look like a fool saying that Essendon didn't look too bad after getting beaten by West Coast. But I do know what he was saying. I know what he was saying. He didn't say it right, though. So I think they're a good shot there. The rest, yeah, that's it. Fremantle, Port Adelaide to finish the round's probably a good one too. But, yeah. I agree with what you're saying.
Charlotte here. What a comment.
Yeah. Find something better to do.
And we had some good questions. This will be a fun exercise for the chat. But first, we'll hand over. Michael on Twitter asks, can we have some intel from training now? Obviously, because I'm in quarantine because I've got the lurgy. You were there. So tell us, what did you see at training today? Any intel you can give us?
The intel I'll give you is don't take an 18-month-old to open training. That's the first bit of intel. Look, it was... Open training is a very tricky one to get your head around because it's basically just first gear, isn't it? They're rolling around. But I think what I will say is the biggest bit of intel is Jacob Whittaker. Unless there is something hidden or an unseen hurdle that he's got to jump, I can't see how he doesn't play on Friday. He no strapping in the main group, taking overhead marks. He looked fit. So unless they're worried maybe about contact. How much can that improve in a week? I don't know. He looked fit. He looked fitter than a few of the blokes who will be running around on Friday. I can tell you that for now. But that's probably the insider bit. Ed Curnow, similar. He looked like I was shocked that he hasn't been playing VFL footy. Maybe the calf, they're still not 100%. It's better, but basically the only intel I've got is that Whittaker looked ready to go. So I think you'll play. But the language is so different. Yeah, the language is so different. On Monday, I watched Voss at the press conference after the Fremantle game. Voss was like, "Nah, Whittaker's got another week." On Monday, it was like, Whittaker, he's a chance, but he's probably likely another week. Then today, Voss is like, well, if he gets through training, he's available. And I'm like, the language has changed. And I tell you what, he did more than got through training. So I think
genuinely think Carlton are playing a little game because I know Ryder is a doubt this week. He's come back to training. I think they're trying to push that agenda of bringing him back. And I think if Carlton can do that, what they're going to do is they're going to sacrifice Cooper Sharman, who I think would trouble Carlton a lot more than Ryder, because Ryder's a better ruckman, but Sharman's got a bigger body. And if you watched him last week, he's an awkward customer. And it would mean, you'd imagine, Lewis Young takes him. I think if Carlton can alleviate that, Whittaker won't mind matching up on Ryder. And then Young, traditionally Max King struggled with taller backmen. If you watched Melbourne, Petty battered him, and Harrison Petty is just the guy that opens the door for the Adams family. So that'll be an interesting one. This is a question from Charlotte. Owens, was he there?
I didn't see Owens there. No, the player. And look, to be honest, when you're at open training, it's hard to notice. I was obviously had my kids there and all that, but I didn't see Owens. I didn't see Jack Martin. Cripps wasn't with the main group. And there was an interesting one with Liam Stocker. He was doing what to me looked like, anyone who else is there can maybe correct me if it looked like a bit of a fitness test type thing. Liam Stocker in the middle, he had the band. Andrew Russell was holding the orange band, and he's running. He was the only one who was doing it, so that's a bit of an interesting one. I'm not too sure.
Probably just containing him because he's an animal.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, Chera was there.
Chera, just interesting. Another unpopular opinion. Whittaker. Has he not got the worst fucking hairstyle in the AFL?
Oh man, actually when he was on the bench when he hurt his hamstring against Essendon, look, it looked like bloody Dumb and Dumber, the Harry and Lloyd Dumb and Dumber haircut. Yeah, it's not a great cut.
It's very bad. It's very bad, but we'll be back next week. That is all we've got time for. We are over our. Thank you very much for the donations and joining. Me and Fazz will be back next week with another agenda. So make sure you stay tuned for that. We've had almost, I think, my favourite time tonight. It's been good to have Fazz back and hang around with you guys.
Yeah, love it. It's like I said, it's good to just be on one that's not starting at 11:30 at night. As good as those ones are, to be honest. But yeah, it's terrific.
They'll be back when the EPL's back. Don't worry. But
excited.
We'll
Thanks
have
for
to do
having
some
me.
World Cup watch-alongs.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, cheers, everyone. Thank you very much. Have a good night, and we'll see you throughout the week. Make sure you sub to Fazz's Twitter. Big Fazz, get around him because he loves sticking it up to Carlton fans and opposition.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, the best people to get into are Carlton fans, actually. It's really weird. Like, I love Carlton, but yeah, it's funny. All right.